the aspect of innovation, the aspect of growth, the aspect of jobs, the aspect of made right here, um, becomes becomes little bits and pieces that form the bricks that form the wall that is patriotism.
Today on Customerland, Robert Passikoff, who is founder and CEO of Brand Keys. We're talking about Brand Keys' 24th annual Most Patriotic Brands Survey and what that reveals the American psyche, what brands can do about it. Robert, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me again.
So it's been a while, a lot of water under the bridge, which is a real shame because you're putting out lots and lots of data and lots of interesting insights that brands can use. But for the moment, let's just focus on this one because one, it's really timely. Two, I have to say, I was famous by proxy for a moment because I saw one of the current Jeep commercials where they said, "We are the most patriotic brand in America," or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And I nudged the person next to me and said, "Yeah, I know the guy who found out that stuff, and that's why they're using it." So let's dig into that a little bit. There's a lot to talk about. This year's study showed a noticeable uptick in how customers value patriotism. What do you think is driving the kind of heightened importance? Is it just a climate, or what's behind that?
Well, I think the climate has a little bit to do with it. I mean, let's not forget that the majority of people thought that patriotism was always important. I mean, we never had small numbers when we looked at that. I think it's up 5% in terms of the positive views this year. Again, likely some of that has to do with climate. There seems to be some value shifts in terms of what we ought to be looking at, who we are as Americans, what we do value, our personal and emotional reactions to things. So, but yeah, I would have bet that we would have seen more. We certainly don't see less. I mean, that's the other thing. The other side of the scale is just whoever it is that doesn't really care about patriotism has been the same numbers not caring about patriotism for a long time.
Right. I mean, current climate, again, it seems like um, you have to be, I guess we've been activated or reactivated into patriotism recently. I mean, that can mean all kinds of things, but now it's a much more important factor than it probably was 10 years ago.
It is, I think, a combination of elements. Because we are able to utilize psychological metrics in terms of our measures, rather than we don't just ask someone. I mean, to be honest, we do ask them if they think it's more or less important, but in order to be able to understand the particular value of patriotism, you've got to get under the radar. You can't just ask directly. And I've been saying as a non-psychological definition, you are talking about personal values, you're talking about sentiment, you're talking about culture, you're talking about history. I mean, we just published something about how loyalty builds on the shoulders of different interdisciplinary areas, over the past, reasonably over the past 75, 80 years. This is the same thing because, we went back and looked at some other numbers to see how they correlated with things, and it's interesting. If you stop and look at the world from a media perspective of outreach and social networking and the 24/7, 365, I can get you, you can get me, we can talk to whoever we want to talk to. That aspect about about having the ability to express one's values and your personal and emotional feelings whenever you want creates a foundation for looking at a single value like patriotism.
So one of the things that I've loved about all of our conversations and all of the studies that you've produced over the years is that what starts out as very touchy-feely stuff, to be honest, boils down really quickly into actionability, into real steps that brands can and often do take to shore up customer expectations and meet the feelings, quote unquote, of what customers are all about at the moment. And case in point again is what Jeep has done. I want to read just the top kind of the winners, if you will, list here and talk about one of them in particular. But Jeep was ranked number one again with Ford, Coca-Cola, Levi Strauss, Apple, and Walmart kind of leading the patriotism parade. Um, Jeep has been number one in this survey for a long time.
For every year for the 24 years that we've done it.
So beyond heritage,
Okay.
what specific cues or behaviors do you think keep Jeep locked in as America's most patriotic brand?
Well, what we know for the brands themselves is that it takes more than wrapping yourself in the flag or putting on an Uncle Sam mask. I mean, you can't just drape yourself in red, white, and blue and expect that people are going to do it. Particularly the generations that we deal with now, within the media scape that we live in, with the electronics that we live in, the aspects of symbolism and tradition resonate a lot higher than they did 25 years ago.
Right.
And so what what you've got, and I pass this along, and this is like it's the grandmother test of things, because you'll have people who will ask a question and go, huh, that's interesting. Why is that? And when you give them the answer, which again tends to be either symbolic or traditional or some combination of that with values, people then go, oh, yeah. And so when you look at someone like Ford, for example, it's a Ford, you know, it's the Ford was the founding father of industrialism in the United States. And so the aspect of innovation, the aspect of growth, the aspect of jobs, the aspect of made right here, um, becomes becomes little bits and pieces that form the bricks that form the wall that is patriotism. I mean, you don't need to go much farther than Jeep won all the wars that we've ever been in. I mean, partly a reality, sorry, it's real, but it's in every movie we've ever seen, every old Life magazine looking at the war that we've ever seen. I mean, that that kind of that kind of resonance, that kind of symbolism, creates a tsunami in terms of an ideology toward, okay, pick a word. I mean, in this instance, we're able, the process allows us to be able to isolate one value and then, give it a value, and then assign a value to it so we know how strong or weak it is. But that's really tough. I mean, there are easier ones like, look at someone like Disney and think about the Main Street Parade that's held every day at
Right.
sundown.
Right.
hey, if you can't leverage true Americana,
Right.
then
Right. They're
you're in
repainting
a
going
lot
to Rockwell every single night.
you're in a lot of trouble.
Right. Looking through the data and some of the things that you surfaced, one of the most striking findings is that brands now rate far higher than government institutions when it comes to patriotism. And that I think it blows me away. It blows me away. And yet it's not surprising at all. I think it was just the
Well,
realization that, wow, this is really true.
yeah, I mean, first of all, we put that out recently with I think the top 10 most patriotic brands. Um, we're still doing the analytics for the top 50, which is what we normally do, and we'll do that at the beginning of next month, where
How far down the list did the government institutions fall?
well, the government, okay. So we look at about 1,400 brands. I don't remember the precise number. It's about 1,400 brands that we then dissect. We go in and remove the patriotism piece and see how they do it. Um, it's probably less than 1,400 because certain brands are so foreign, which remind me comment I want to make, I mean, for example, Hyundai, which rates very, very highly in terms of loyalty. They do very, very well every year with loyalty, is is at a disadvantage when it comes to looking at patriotism, and not because they don't do good things in the United States. I mean, it's just that if you have a South Korean name, already have a barrier
Sure.
that you're dealing with. But this year, partially because of just what's been going on with the government, we added in the office of the presidency. I want to be clear, we didn't attach President Trump's name to it. We just, the office of the president, and then the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the RNC and the DNC. We were curious to see. We had never measured those before. There had been no need to do it. We always look at a for-profit brand collection. Um, uh, Outside of the military services, which we measure every year and score 100% every year, and we thank them for their service. But we added those in, and I have to say that being a cynical New York research guy, the numbers were low. I mean, it shocked me how low. I mean, when you it's the government, for God's sake. They're supposed to be patriotic. They're supposed to
Well,
be doing stuff.
well, let me ask you this.
Numbers were very low. They were
This is the first year you've measured those institutions. Was it just kind of a gut check that prompted that? Like, hey, this would be interesting to see what's what this year. Or was there something else behind it? Because, I've had these kinds of conversations before, and we've looked at past patriotic brand surveys together, and we've talked about them. And I don't ever recall a time when that would have, in my mind, been a worthwhile thing to survey for. It was just given, it's the government. How do people feel about it? But this year, I think it's vitally important. I'm curious as to what was the light bulb moment or the catalyst to saying we got to do this.
Well, you stop and think about you stop and think about brands. I mean, it started initially with brands, which, essentially look to be, and again, for their own benefit, this is a business, not a hobby. So they're doing it, but they look to be uniform, they look to be unifying. They look to be trustworthy. They want, it's like everyone in the tent. On the other hand, these days, the political parties, the entities just seem extraordinarily divisive. And so I just was, I mean, part of it was curiosity. Everyone tends to look at everything through a political lens. Can't get away from it. And it could, the right or the left, it doesn't really matter. It's the president blathering away about something, or it's someone in the Senate saying something. It's just it's they they seem to be hammering everything. And you can of course have your own personal feeling about it, but I'm more comfortable if I have the consumer 7,000 consumers standing behind me telling me what's going on, you know, then you can be real smart about stuff.
Right.
Uh, and and just a call out on this, that the half of the audience, half and half are looked at by political affiliation. And we look at the totals, but I don't want anyone to think that, oh, well, the presidency didn't do well and they just talked to
Right. Right.
Democrats or liberals. It's a full spectrum view when it comes to politics. The rest of it is qualification within the category, usage within the category, usage of the brands and so forth. But the numbers are extraordinarily low,
You know,
extraordinarily low. I mean, you've got I think the House and Senate for patriotism are down in the 20s, and the
wow.
average and the
Wow.
and to put it into context, the average of the top 50 brands, the average for them is 76.
And where did Jeep fall in that? Just for additional context.
Jeep ends up at a 99 when
Okay. And that the
patriotism.
House and the Senate end up at what again? You can optimize for NPS, and that's good. You can optimize for CSAT, also good. You can optimize for loyalty, and that's good too. But here's the thing, if you're not optimizing for total customer value, for total customer profitability, then you're just optimizing for output, not the bottom line. Here's the truth. If your strategy isn't building better customers, more frequent, more loyal, more deeply bonded, then it's not a strategy, it's a performance. At Customerland Studio, we help brands find the value, find the opportunities, the force multipliers hiding inside the customer relationship. And then we help them optimize for scale, for yield, for profit across the entire relationship. Because the other thing we've learned, the only strategy that actually matters is the one that makes your customers more profitable. Customerland Studio, to make better customers. Go to customerland.net and click on the studio.
House was 25, Senate was 28, I think.
They have a branding issue.
Oh, well, this is the other thing we looked at. I was curious to see, we talk about personal reactions, emotional reactions, values. They have trust issues as well. If you look at recent, not our studies, but recent national studies that some of the, larger news organizations have done. Trust for the House and Senate are below 40% each. I mean, they're in the high 30s,
Right.
but when you stop and think, it's kind of like saying, gee, I went out and I bought this product. I paid money and I bought this product, but I didn't really think it was going to work. So I only think I'm only giving it a 33%. I mean, for God's sake, if, without sounding like a weird patriot, what's the most valuable thing you've got is your vote as a citizen. You voted for these people,
with a 30% confidence rate. Yeah. Which, that's
for trust. I mean, that's not great. That's not great. If
that's
you
not
had a
great.
company
Yeah.
and if you had
If
a company and someone came and said, "Wow, 66% of your folk don't trust you."
Well, think about it in terms of relationships. Like, trust is a foundational thing. If my spouse had a 30% confidence rating in my trust level, that's not good. That's
Yeah.
that's no bueno. But I think, trust is one thing, and I think it's pretty easy to define, but the way you're looking at this as through patriotism can be a lot of different things. I think it's defined differently, isn't it? I'd love to know just your thoughts on, when people talk about this, when they answer these questions, are they responding to values? Are they responding to actions,
Well, okay.
messaging? What does
It's
that really mean?
in this world, it is indeed looking at messaging to a certain extent, much smaller extent than one would think, because it's extraordinarily easy to, go into the computer room and change everything to red, white, and blue and wave flags and roll out marching bands. It's all value driven in terms of what what values a brand owns as it relates, as because you're right, it's not just one thing. There isn't a pill that says patriotism and take this.
Right. You can't just
Um,
like slap a label on it.
it has it has to do, for example, with sentiment. Um, I think Jeep Jeep does what Jeep gets what it gets because there is that historical and historical sentiment about winning the war, how we win the war, what was there for that. Um, there are aspects that will resonate in terms of culture. And I think that I'm sorry to reach for the easy example, but the Disney aspect of that of the town hall march every I mean, that is classic Americana. That is the nirvana of America where people want to live and have the kids run in the fields with the gazebo in the town square and the marching, and the fire department marching band play. And the lights at night. I mean, that because there's a cultural resonance to that. There's also the aspects of pride for something, pride in terms of innovation, but there's also the pride and respect for the military, which is why every one of the services ends up every year getting, when we do the math, ends up being at 100.
Right.
I mean, you know, the thing is that there are individual individual bits and pieces that you are able to, I was going to say dissect because you really can. I mean, a lot of times it's just, hey, this is the brand and I feel good about it and it is, and yada yada. But if you go in and you do the kind of psychological work that we do and the statistical work that we do, you can see that you can be regarded as patriotic if you are, if I was using a line in something I was writing for you and me, um, it was made right here. It was made right here. You know, that the aspect of hard work, the aspect of equal opportunity. I mean, when you say these things, I mean, you and I can have a decent conversation about it, but a lot of times this stuff rings hollow when you go, here's a list, let me give you a list of the things that, mom apple pie and Apple phones, but but a lot of it is the innovation that is involved in this. So it's more than one thing. I mean,
Well, it,
there's an ideology to it, but
well, you've said that there's, it's more than about flag waving, and it's you can't wrap yourself in red, white, and blue, and and there you are, a patriotic brand. But the consumer is perceiving things that aren't necessarily intentionally being put out there. They're always analyzing. We are always analyzing for authenticity. Is this a good thing, a bad thing, a real thing? So what are those things, those signals that a consumer is registering to kind of classify that's Jeep. Jeep is my number one. I mean, what are some of those things? You've said some of them, but knowing you, and I know you fairly well, you've probably got a list somewhere of what that really means.
well, there are things that become different for us. I mean, particularly in the mess. Well, let's go to the easy one. The messaging tends to be an easy outreach. The thing, because you could support veterans, fund education, promote the Made in the USA. I mean, it's all great, except that we're dealing with much smarter consumers. So if I turn around and I say something because I think that it sounds patriotic, consumers are too smart about that. You can't pull the wool over their eyes. I mean, um, you see a lot of stuff. I mean, if, I think just hearkening back to the political stuff, it's nothing. It's nothing but pure. The messaging is nothing but pure division. Oftentimes, There's very little. Let's find this. Let's make this work for you. It
Right.
tends to be regarded like a partisan
Sure.
cudgel.
Very intentionally.
Um, the other thing is that yeah, uh, it's 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 fine, let's there's a sale that everyone's going to have a Fourth of July sale, but the ones that are going to work are going to the brands that are going to be perceived as being patriotic are also going to recognize what the day is. And there are folks that I don't know that folks forget it. How do you forget Fourth of July? You know
Right.
what it
Right.
is and
Or it
what
just may not be top of mind per se.
but they don't make it an aspect of what the values are that they build in. And again, if you look at what political messaging is or just bad brand messaging, it doesn't have anything like that. Um, Part of it is what are you selling? And I'm selling inclusion. I mean, I hope I don't get in trouble with the government by
Yeah,
talking.
you're toast.
Inclusion, whereas on the political side, what you got, is fear and blame. They're different than we are. That's like, no, that's not what it's supposed to
It's
be.
not a patriotic factor, you
Well,
know.
I had something. You and I, I'd written something, and then I think you and I had a, a conversation like this as well. And then later on, I ran into someone in the business who was talking about the fact that don't you think that it's like bad if a brand just involves itself just politically with one party because now they've excluded everyone else and that's half their audience? And I was like, yeah, You know, I look to sell stuff to everyone. I don't care how you vote. I mean, that's part of what the business is like.
It's the new segmentation, you know.
Well,
I-
again, everyone looks through stuff through, with a lens, a political lens, and that that may work in terms of politics, but it sure as hell not working in terms of government, and it
no.
doesn't, and it never works for a brand.
So, we've talked about what got these brands to the top of the list. One thing we haven't talked about, I'm not even sure we have, in fact, I know we don't have time to really do justice to this topic, but for brands that didn't make the top of the list, what do they do? And before you answer that, because I'm dying to hear that, I'm going to propose that this is a phase two of this conversation because I think that's the meaty stuff. That's the prescriptive stuff that people who pay attention to brand affinity and brand loyalty and and how that factors into their go-to-market schemes will need to hear that.
Be my pleasure. I
All
I I,
right.
I would just say in 20 seconds. I think the fact is that brands that do not score high either take it for granted that it's part and parcel of the thing, and more likely it's like, hey, we have Fourth of July sales too,
Right.
and they
So
leave
there
it.
you go, which is the same thing, just kind of not taking it seriously. Well, Robert, thank you for this, for unrolling this giant, often or seemingly unwieldy bundle of data and showing us what's what. For people listening, we'll have a link to this survey here at the podcast. But Robert, just by way of note, is also a frequent contributor to Customerland. So you can see his insights and punditry there on a weekly basis.